Hello and welcome to this session. I'm just going to give you a quick overview, shall we say, of what the requirements are for the assignment linked to human factors. Okay, so I want to give you an overview of the questions and what we're looking for. I also want you to appreciate critical evaluation at level 7 and the expectations associated with that. And then finally, because it is an academic piece of work, there is a requirement to make sure you cover Harvard referencing, and within that to give us sufficient detail to add credibility to the answer that you're giving, rather than just quote, using your own interpretation and summarizing some of the key points. So I'm going to go through each of the questions, brief overview first of all, and then start going into it. So as you'll be aware from the assignment brief, section A, or the first question, is compulsory. So you've got to do the whole of question 1, and then questions 2 and 3, it is a choice as to which one you choose, but nevertheless, in total, there are answers required for 2 of the 3 questions. So you must cover question 1, and then you can choose from question 2 or question 3. So this particular question's no scenario to it. It's just designed to look at HSG 48 and some of the understandings around human factors. So what I thought I'd do is just break down some aspects of the question. First of all, when we say identify, it means more than just listing the documents that you may choose. So it's asking for 3, and then it's saying give 2 in a little bit more detail. So what we really want is a short sentence at the title, at the side of the title of each document, talking about the purpose and background of that document. Then with the 2 selected examples, explain how risks can be reduced when considering the human factors. So focus on reducing risk by considering how human factors are present and, in fact, what is needed to control and reduce those risks. Now, again, I mentioned before about it being an academic piece of work. Give your examples, support it. It doesn't always have to come from that one document that you're listing there. You can go outside of it to give discussion and show that you've provided further research, or you've gone on and done further research over and above the 1 or 2 chosen documents that you're going to quote. So do that, but also quote from the document. Rather than it just being your words, it adds credibility if you can take a little bit of information out of the document, and then, having done that, summarize it in terms of what does it mean and how do we use it. Provide sufficient details to support the comments you're making or the argument you're making and your personal views, in line with some of the discussions from the quotes that you've picked out. In 1B, we're looking for something a little bit different because it's the human factors around accident causes. So you need to show the links to at least 2 examples of accident models that you would choose, and then give an explanation around the human factors associated with those 2 accident models. You can go more than 2, you can show further reading if you wish, but we want a little bit more detail on the accident causation from the perspective of human factors in relation to the accident models chosen. I've discussed here the critical analysis that's expected, because when you do critically analyze at level 7, there is an expectation. So we need that depth in the discussion. We need those quotes to support that you have an understanding of the subject area, and those quotes need to be adequately referenced so there's no question about plagiarism as such. So when I say the subject area, in this case it's human factors, but about 1B in particular, it's about those models, those accident models, and also the links to causation from human factors. So How this can be used to prevent recurrence of accidents and incidents is important when you break the question down. Focus on the management and control of risk to prevent incidents with respect to human factors. Now, I've put this percentage in there just to give you an idea of the word count. And they've been given from 1B, and expect slightly more work done than in 1A. So please make sure you get the balance right. Similarly with 1C, that's also a 30%, so a similar amount of word count as 1B. Now, it's important to use suitably referenced work when you're answering 1C. Show the market you have a good understanding of the subject, but you've also done further research and you have wider research as well. So if you've got any examples from documents other than HSE, I found that really useful as an extra mark, should we say. Further, when you're explaining how human factors affect health and safety at work, don't do the same as what was in 1B. That was a different question. That was specific to preventing incidents. So instead, focus on the management of human factors. So how do we monitor it? And also, how do we effectively control those human factors? So the discussion should be more around those areas in 1C rather than the preventing incidents as was discussed in 1B. So make sure you distinguish the two. And again, it's 30% of the overall course, or question. So show your understanding again of this subject and give us that debate, give us that critical analysis, and show your further reading as such, references and quotes to say another author's viewpoint on this is, and explain that viewpoint rather than just accepting what a particular HSE document says. And in 1D, explain how hazard perception is increased in human factors. Now, two key parts of this. I want to know about perception. So there's an expectation about discussed perception and how that can be influenced in terms of human behaviours, the decision making that's done, and also the speed of response in a safety critical manner. So particularly look at maybe designs, for example, of machinery and equipment, and how you can hit a safety button relatively easily and in a timely manner at a time of crisis. Or it could be a warning beacon that's going off, a very loud noise that's going beep, 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 and a big flashing light. That strong stimuli influences immediate action. So give us that. Support it again with quotes and references, but nevertheless, show off, should we say, your understanding of what we mean by perception, and then further how it influences human behavior, human actions, human decisions. So that's what we're looking for. Much smaller detail, it's half as much as 1C. So again, it's kind of like summing up some key points around hazard perception and also human factors. So don't go overboard on 1D. In question 2, you are given a scenario. So we'll state the scenario, and I've decided to break it down for you as such so you can get an understanding of what we're looking for. But then the second part of it is the actual question. So look at the two separately, get an understanding first of all what the scenario is before you then consider the question. Okay, so this is typically how I look at it. And again, with it being 100% here, this must match in terms of word count what you put down in question 1. In the brief, it says 2 to 3 pages. Some people would say that's about 1,000 words. I'm not going to put a limit on it. I'm just thinking of my time as the marker. I'd rather have it around 1,500 words rather than 2,500 to 3,000 words. That's purely selfishness on my part, in terms of it would be extra time for me to read it, digest it, and then mark it. Plus, from a critical analysis point of view at level 7, you need to be concise, you need to get your point across well, because when it comes to writing dissertations, we don't want the bluff and the blabber, as we call it, padding it out, the information, when it doesn't really link to the research that you've done. So a concise approach is much better, whilst also showing your understanding of the subject area and having the credibility that requires a lot of quotes to substantiate your argument. So bear that in mind in terms of balance, but as I say, 100% here in comparison to the whole of question 1, which was broken down into 4 parts. So 2 to 3 pages of information required in the answer. So as I say, look at the scenario first, and I've looked at it in a slightly different way. It's saying, well, when I read this, I break it down. Consider the forklift truck activity. It's in a DIY store whereby members of the public are visiting to buy DIY products. The child was injured because of the fireplace falling off the raised truck forks. No safe system was in place. That's definitely a human factor. The director was aware of the issue. Yeah, so the couple of links later on when you think about directors' responsibilities. And also no formal training in the use of the forklift truck. That's worrying as well. But also perhaps the forklift truck was not fit for purpose. So all these are things that are built into the scenario as such. And again, I'm hoping that when you look at the question, you can then make your answer specific to the scenario so it's not ignored. So let's look at the question. Now we have that understanding. And here, the test as such is to check your understanding of typically sections 1 to 9 of the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974, but it could be a little bit more than that if you wish to show off your knowledge, particularly with the director one. So let's look at the question now. So it's human factors because this is what we're looking at, and I'm trying to check that some of sections 1 to 9 are more specific to human factors than others. Yeah, so bear that in mind when you're putting your answers together. I typically would look at the ones that do need addressing. Section 1's bound to be covered. Section 2, there are elements of that cover human factors, so that would be in there. And go through each one. Section 3, because it's a DIY, so it's got to be considered in terms of breaches to duty of care for people other than employees, and so on and so forth. So give me the ones that are applicable, but maybe section 5 is repealed anyway, so that's not even in there. Is there a link to section 6? Is there a link to 7 and 8 and 9? Perhaps, perhaps not, but look at it and then give a description. So what I've done is, just to give you an idea of what I'm looking for here, is provided one example, section 22B, where it says the provision and maintenance of plant and systems of work. Well, you could argue that 2 parts have been breached here. That unsafe plant, the forklift truck, wasn't safe. And then secondly, the safe system of work that should be in place. So in my description, I've only looked at safe system, but you could go on and talk about the forklift truck not being fit for purpose as well. So here, all I've said is the lack of a safe system of work that employees were trained to follow, indicating that they should stop the forklift truck when pedestrians are in the area, and so on. So start with an easy and logical way, I'm saying here, start with the various sections, give a little bit of an interpretation. It doesn't have to be word for word, as I've put in there, but nevertheless, show me what is the law, and then say what's been breached, and give me your reasons as to why you believe that has been breached. So your answer should discuss any further information you may need to obtain during your investigation to help you to decide how human factors contributed to and whether any contraventions of legal requirements have occurred. So this is looking at the second part of the question, is to looking more about the investigation techniques you might consider specifically to look at the human failings, the human factors. You know, was the child, for instance, not effectively supervised? What was the issue around the director? Why did they ignore previous information? If you were investigating that as part of your accident investigation technique, you would probably have to pull them over the coals and say, come on, surely you knew that this was a significant risk, and anything that has a significant risk requires a decent risk assessment done, and within that, there'll be a lot of controls. So why did you choose maybe production efficiency and selling above the health and safety of members of the public? So you can go quite into some detail about these factors, but in this specific answer, I'm looking for the links to, if you were doing the investigation, how would you draw out, how would you discuss those human factors, not just the obvious causes of the incident itself. And also, if you can get your hands on similar examples in industry, or maybe a DIY company has been prosecuted for an incident that happened in one of their stores, then look at that and look at what was breached there, and perhaps use that case to say, in such a case, this is what happened and the company was prosecuted for, and link it to the sections, or even link it to other legislation like provision use of work equipment regulations, or even codes of practices or guidance documents. So let's say forklift trucks, the Road Traffic Industry Training Board have something in place specifically for training. And in that, there's supposed to be 3 types of training offered. 1, get your driving license done for using a forklift truck. 2, the specifics of how to drive that particular forklift truck in that DIY store. And then 3, any variations that may be on the job task itself. So loading and unloading off a racking system inside the DIY store. Okay, so try and link it to some of those aspects associated with the human factor as well. Now, in question 3, again split into 2 parts here, so 40% and 60%. I guess the first part is really looking at your understanding of Industrial Guidance Document 90, human factors and ergonomics. So within that, I'm saying what contributes to musculoskeletal disorders, because it kind of implies in there that human factors are a major contributing factor towards MSDs. So a good understanding, should we say, of Industrial Guidance Document 90, if you've read through that and you'd like it, then focus on the typical factors: ergonomics, job and task, physical and psychological characteristics, and then organization and social environment. Now, it's not a very detailed document, so maybe you need to show by further sourcing, further referencing, further reading, your critical analysis of this. Yeah, so to show off your understanding of the subject. So do a bit of research, find out a little bit more about the human factors and ergonomics, and then look to causes of musculoskeletal disorders. Perhaps you'll use the HSC's statistics on MSDs as well, and so on and so forth. But widen your reading, don't just look at Industrial Guidance Document 90. And then the second part of the question, again, focusing on human factors in terms of prevention. So what do we know from Industrial Guidance Document 90? And further, what else is there out there that shows us that this is the best way to manage that particular risk when we consider human factors? So it's a 60%er. I'd expect a lot more detail in Part B than in Part A. So again, maybe if you were dividing it into, say, 2,000 words in total, you may have 800 words dedicated to Part A, 1,200 words dedicated to Part B. Yeah, if you were doing that, just to give you a number, if you feel you need that. So, according to Industrial Guidance Document 90, it says design of the tasks, workstation layout, managing the working day, engaging with employees, hazard spotting, reviewing and monitoring work, and they give some good case study examples within that. So I'm expecting an understanding of that, but not just quoting directly from the guidance document itself, but the further reading, the critical analysis, the better understanding, and the showing off of your understanding of the subject area, which in this case is human factors. Okay, so just to finish off, I've covered this anyway in terms of citation and referencing, but just a reminder, presenting someone else's work as not as your own is classed as plagiarism. If you don't reference the work of others, you are plagiarizing, and it can be accidentally poor scholarship by doing that. But from the university's perspective, they will investigate it. They have a tool that they'll put your assignment through, and it will determine how much common ground there is between your work and other people's work. And in doing so, it will then say their opinion on using algorithms as to whether it's plagiarism or not. So sometimes it just can be because you've poorly written down in a scholarly way. So yeah, academic writing and the way you reference is very important. So we want you to follow the Harvard referencing style. It's written into the main body, but also when you've used that reference, there should be a list at the end that shows the author and also the date. So inside the main part of your work, as it's called here in the parenthesis, so the main body of your work, it will just have the name and also the year. But then at the end, in the detailed reference list, it will show a lot more. So that if I need to research it, I can check that. So Harvard style requires it. It should be in the list. It should be in alphabetical order, and it should cover everything that you've quoted within your answer sheet. Typically, you need the author's name and their initials. You need the year of publication, the title of the book, the article or the journal, the publisher, and the place of publication, and the page number if you're going to be that specific. Okay, so we always advise people to get that information every time you are going to use a quote, is to make a note of all those subject areas: the author, the year, the title, the publisher, the publication place, and page number. If you have that, you can't go far wrong. So my example, as I've used inside our documents in regard to human factors, there we've got it, how it should be lined out: the author, the year, the title, the edition, the place of the publication, the publisher, and the enumeration, if it's specific about a page. So what I will put in the main bulk will be, I said March, so it should be Marsh. Sorry about that. So Tim Marsh was the author. So I'll put Marsh and in brackets 2017. So wherever the quote is or the citation is inside the main body, that's how it would look. But then in the reference list, it would look something like Marsh Tim, comma, 2007, the title, the edition, the publisher, and then the pages. Okay, so try and follow that route as you, every time you think, oh, I need to go and research this. When you find a book, yeah, look at the book, pick it up, find out all that information that's in there, write it down so that when it comes to producing your reference list, it's there and there's no question of plagiarism. Okay, so that's the end of that particular session. Just wanted to make sure you have a good understanding of what the requirements are, and hopefully you've got a better approach this in a logical way, whereby the answers will be what I'm looking for when it comes to marking. The pass mark needs to be 50%. However, if you get 45 to 50%, I'll look upon that and decide whether it's sufficient to provide a pass. If you want to go for a higher mark than that, then refer to the assessment criteria that's at the bottom of the assignment brief, and make sure you go for more detail to support your argument. So that takes it above 65 to 70% to get a really good mark. Right, so thank you very much for listening, and good luck with your assignment.